I want to welcome all you back. You've been somewhere, I'm not sure where, but you've been probably very busy wherever that was. And for those who may have missed our opening session, this is the report out on this project. The project itself is Getting to Zero, Achieving Zero Loss of Crown Jewel Intellectual Property, a checklist for CXOs. And we have 3 judges, myself, and with me Richard Marshall, CEO of X-SES, and Stephen Sprague, CEO of Wave Systems, both of whom are also involved in INVNT IP. And then we have our challenge team, and in no particular order, Barry Briggs, IT Chief Architect and CTO Microsoft, Ty Carlson, Senior Manager, Technology Program Management, Digital Products Group, Amazon, Jeff Hudson, CEO, Venafi, Pete Nicoletti, Chief Information Security Officer, VirtuStream, Eric Openshaw, Vice Chairman and U.S. Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Leader, Deloitte, Larry Smar, Director, CalIT2, a UC San Diego Irvine Partnership, UCSD, Vaslav Vincilek, President, Pacific Coast Information Systems, and Jerry Woodall, Founder, Woodall Tech, and National Medal of Technology Laureate. So we know we have the horsepower. The question is going to be, do we have the solutions? And Ty, are you the designated hitter tonight?
I think I'm more the distributor of information, and then we'll proxy out as appropriate to the experts in specific areas.
I turn it over to you.
Okay. So here's our challenge, right? Is to get to the crown jewel, zero loss of the crown jewel IP. And the challenge with this task is that there isn't necessarily, or in the past we've seen silver bullets. In the discussion with the group and with the members of FiRe, that there isn't that silver bullet in this challenge, because this is a very difficult and a very, as Larry was describing, defense in depth type of approach to solving this problem. So it's really a multifaceted approach, and so as we'll step through this, we'll see that this is exactly what we have to do to move this forward. And I realize that there we go. So fundamentally, as we set the stage, this is a national crisis. And I think that mentality needs to be shared and broadly communicated. Certainly, those who are attacking us already know. And I think the key is that the message get out and be broad, and the message be communicated that we are broadly under attack, and that this become part of the national discussion. Not something that is talked behind closed doors that, hey, we're being attacked. No, we are being attacked, and we must take very clear and measured steps, because unless the employees, unless the individuals within the corporation or within the organization, within academia, understand the value that they have in their hands and the loss and the potential damage to the organization or to the economy of the United States, that this is going to be a major problem. So as we made steps that clearly people understand this, the scale of this, that it's massive and it's growing. So the response that we have is really more of a policy and a technology response. In recent years, we've really attacked it really with technology. This is more about how we standard with policy and map it with technologies. And the point really is that we know everybody's been penetrated, but in the solution set of this, it's not going to be a response of individuals, and it's not going to be a response of individual corporation. It really needs to be corporations and organizations working together in tandem, sharing information about how they're being attacked, how this is going down, so that we can then coordinate our response and have the best information to be able to respond to the attacks and to be able to adjust what we're doing and change how we're responding, because if we all do everything exactly the same way, they'll know where our vulnerabilities are. We need to move, and we need to be unpredictable in our responses as well. We'll start first with the crown jewels. We had quite a bit of discussion about the crown jewels and how we should manage the crown jewels. One of the things we need to be able to do is, in protecting crown jewels, is not necessarily the fact that you have the crown jewels actually sitting out there on display, is that you actually have fake jewels, right? With a payload on them, think of it as maybe a parting gift that we give to the thief. Where in the case of code, and many of these attacks are electronic, but in the case of code, the code actually looks real, and in fact it will compile. So it looks like they have the real thing to them. What they don't happen to note, for example, is that as soon as it boots up, it actually gathers information about where it's at, its environment, the IP addresses, what other network devices it can see, what access it has. So it in itself becomes its own, if you will, virus looking around, and then it phones home and reports where it's at. So we have the ability to track where this is going, and then also put in that traceable honeypots or honey tokens or signatures. Honeypots are basically, for example, a website. If there's a website that's being under attack, where it looks like it's the real website. It has all the information in it. In fact, the file dates and times are being updated periodically, so it looks real. It's fresh content, so that they're digging around in the honeypots. And what you want to do is make them deep enough and robust enough so that the hackers spend time there, so that we have time to track them down, see where they're coming from, and to be able to mount a response, to know more about who's attacking us, how they're attacking us, and where it's coming from. In addition, when the technologies are materials or formulas or things that are not of a code nature, that we actually put other things in them. Jerry, we're talking about, maybe inert chemicals or other things that would give a signature off. In the case of dynamite and explosive, there's materials in there that actually have a signature, so that you know where this material came from, and that you can prove it to the government entities that would actually do enforcement to identify that, yes, this is stolen material. And so that we mark and tag these pieces of information with signatures and other information, so that we can go to the international community, we can go to the Trans-Pacific partners and be able to say, this information was stolen, and be able to show them and reveal that this is truly stolen information. We're talking about preventing single points of failure, right? By being able to use. Pete, did you want to comment on some of that as well?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of cases where there's a single employee that's charged with looking for being in charge of certain data, and you never want to have that. You want to have separation of duties. We all know that. That's a best practice, but in a lot of cases in small and medium-sized companies, there's not a lot of cases there for that. But and then we talk about 2 keys for the missile launch. Literally, not just have it a policy, but having it enforceable with technology, so that an unauthorized process has to be approved by 2 people, and it actually, takes 2 people to launch the missile.
So you can't get to the crown jewels without several people.
Yes.
Just like you don't want missiles launched, or missiles launched by one person.
And then we continue to protect these by frequent inconsistent movement in an IP shell game, right? So that part of the thing that you see in enterprises is that, when does a thing become a crown jewel? Right? In the evolutionary inventionary process, right? When does it actually become a crown jewel? And without a constant kind of review of what is, currently a crown jewel or what is not. I mean, is the Windows 1.0 source code a crown jewel? No, it's probably a nice museum piece. But, the most recent code does need to be protected. So, and when you have that you move it around. Typically, these things are stored on servers, and these servers have the same IP address, and they have the same MAC address. Right, the media access control, which is the actual physical address of the network card, right? And we need to take a look at how the assumptions we've made and change the rules, and do it in an aggressive way, so that these are something that we can do, that we do it inconsistently, so it's not a predictable action, that people don't know when it happens, and yes, it may cause some pain within the organization. But if we really message the importance of managing our security, maintaining our security, this is something that employees will tolerate and is understood. And it's actually something people are proud of, because they protected their information and being responsible to the corporation. So there are other steps here: physical isolation, obfuscating these jewels, as we have, and then also perhaps maintaining a keystone off-site. And this was a discussion, we talked about different keystones. Jerry, you brought up some of the keystone concepts.
Well, yes, when I was working at IBM in San Jose, where they were doing their magnetic recording, they had a room that people had tags on. This is a long time ago. This is back in the 70s. And in order to get into the room, you had to have somebody accompany you with another badge. And then you were tagged so you could be seen walking around the room. So, as I mentioned in our discussion, one of the things I admired about IBM is they didn't use their IP internal. They used their know-how, And so that was the thing they worked on that made them successful, because at least they didn't have to worry about patents revealing something that would allow somebody else to sort of copy what they were doing. If they have some special chemical and final etch, It wasn't in the patent. It was know-how that allowed them to do that. Of course, pretty soon with the mainframe days, with this multi-layer Manhattan sub-basements of metallurgy, it was hard to reverse engineer that. So they actually had a product that was very hard to abscond with the IP. But the important point was that they protected their assets by having it localized in San Jose and nowhere else. And only a few people could actually have access to what was going on in the proprietary processing realm.
And so withholding information, not sharing that information, then holding keystones of key components of the information so that it's not readily reproducible.
It's actually how the United States government has somebody not in DC, so you can't decapitate the government because there's always someone who can take over that is outside of any physical blast radius or anything else. Pretty general idea.
And so what you'll see in some of these things are the new ideas that we're bringing. You'll see them in red. Is like there are techniques that have been in existence, and then there are things that are new ideas. It's like things that we need to change or start to implement. And one of them is to leverage the Trans-Pacific partners. Those partners that are countries that agree that IP is important and it is a major motivator for their economy and it needs to be protected. And like-minded countries working together, standing together cooperatively to be able to manage this. And one of them is been mentioned both by the team as well as our judges as well. In the case of import tariffs on stolen IP-based products, if you can prove that it's been stolen to the committee of the Trans-Pacific partners, that it's been stolen, that we then will take specific actions related to that. If we don't do tariffs, there may be alternatives, delaying the importation of the product because we have to evaluate it, deny entry into the ports, for example, for these materials, or seize the ships or goods. I mean, this is in a war type situation, you actually need to have the authority to seize the goods that are coming into the country, or even transiting our waters that are in violation of the general law and of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That this is our IP that you are stealing, you are transiting our country with it, and we are going to take our rights and bring that IP back on shore. Right. Prevent companies from trading technologies for access. And this is one of the discussions we had is for entry into certain countries, they are making trade-offs, and they're compromising certain amounts of IP in order to have access to these markets. And in this process, they're actually trading their technology for access into these markets. One of the things that we need to actually do is enforce the Wassenaar arrangement, which is specific about export controls on arms and dual-use technology. And one of the things that we talked earlier in FiRe was, Intel shipping 32 nanometer technology some years ago, which was state-of-the-art to China. In order to be able to now befriend China and move that technology into China. And you're literally handling billions of dollars of technological know-how and equipment into China, and literally having them, within the country, be able to access that information and those materials, those machining. I mean, this is state-of-the-art, at the atomic level type of manufacturing, handing it free will off to semiconductor manufacturers in Wuxi to semi into these other countries. This is just crazy. And when you think about, well, what is it about a processing technology? Well, that manufactures computer chips, which manufactures processors, which can be used in warheads and those type of materials. But it also can be used to generate new computers and high-speed computers, which are also something of strategic and national importance. So we need to enforce these. We simply have taken too weak of a stand in this case. Our leadership has, for the good of the economy, and what they don't realize is the damage that it's doing.
Yeah.
And long-term damage, because this, it's years of advancement of technology in these companies. And this doesn't just damage U.S., but also Samsung and others who have invested heavily to develop these technologies, and it's basically being given free for access to the market. It's a huge price to pay. And then we talked about, penalizing companies selling stolen IP, right? Arrest and charge the executives offending companies. It's going to be hard to sell products to other organizations when their executives can't be here to meet with the other executives trying to sell them how good it is when they're actually sitting in jail. It does make it a little bit restrictive. It's that plastic wall, the phone thing. It really doesn't work when you're trying to close deals. We need to deny and revoke visas to other company representatives, right? If they want to have other salespeople and the thing, just don't have the visas to enter the country. You violated RP. And it's a process of taking the stand and getting the message out that we're not going to tolerate that will change the behavior. It's going to take serious action, and it's going to take guts by our politicians and by company leaders to stand up and make this happen. We can't just go on past with that and people steal our stuff anymore. We've talked about denying access to stock exchanges, denying ownership in U.S. companies. Our market is not open for you to violate and then try to sell us the stolen goods. From an industrial policy, there was discussion among the team about creating industry-specific consortia. And this is taking some of the techniques that have been used in different organizations and actually repurposing it. For example, establish consortia-specific private networks. Let's get the companies off the internet, right? If this is where you're being attacked, let's get you out of the front lines, right? If you want to protect yourself, you don't stand on the front lines and put all your material up on front lines. I mean, you go protect it. You have layers of defense. So why is it that our companies have servers that are accessible directly via the internet? That's just crazy, right? Why are we not establishing, think of SabreNet, right? In the US, for those of you familiar with the airline industry, SabreNet is the airline protocol. It's using a 6-bit data protocol, but it's how the airlines communicate with each other. And it's separate from the internet. It is a private network within that industry. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not allowing our best companies within an industry to communicate with one another, share information as appropriate, but get off the internet? Doesn't make sense because their business trading partners can join that network. They don't need to be able to do it all over the internet. This is a fundamental change in how we approach our industry and how we approach our business. We need to change and reflect the threats that are facing us. Create or leverage the industry CSO organization. So the chief security officer, some of the companies don't even have a chief security officer. Some organizations don't have a chief security officer. So who's watching the doors? Right? You might have your security company, monitoring who enters and departs the building, but who's watching the network and who's really evaluating that on an ongoing basis? I know with Barry, with IT and stuff, we have IT protecting and monitoring it. But, do you want to comment more about some of the security things that you see?
Sure. So, among other things, there are such organizations for CSOs, and we need to leverage them more. But I wanted to pick up on your comment about there are organizations that don't even have chief information security officers. I was talking to a hedge fund some months ago, and they asked me, do you know anybody who could be a CISO? And I had to step back in shock because this is one of the world's largest hedge funds. They have assets in the tens of billions of dollars. Their assets are larger than the GDP of 50 to 60% of countries in the world, and they weren't protecting their assets. So, there's a huge amount of education. I think that basic education that we need to bring to the industry at large on the importance of this.
Yeah, it's critical. And then finally, physical isolation, right? Securing networks and restrictive access policies, but also physical isolation, removing the information away from access that people know where it's at, and then move it around so that it's not where it's always been. Governmental policy is another approach that we want to take, and working with the government and organizations to enforce this. We talked about the CISO or the CSO, and that for public organizations, that there's an SEC compliance statement. Think of Sarbanes-Oxley, right? So compliance with SOX actually changed how businesses behaved. It changed how seriously they took validating their financial information. Why is it any different than validating your security information, right? If your IP is how you generate future profits, why are you just handling it after the point's been sold? Why are you not paying the same level of attention and accountability towards the future profits of the company based upon your crown jewels? It doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. We also need to import data classification and marking information. And this was something that was talked about within the group. I like the discussion that went on about identifying the value of that information, and so that people could understand the loss that could be implied. Because when you look at corporate documents and you see, company name confidential or company name, secret, that's just a label that's on so many documents, and they don't really understand the threat of what that is. Now, I know in Microsoft area, there are some different things. That
Right, so the way we think about it is, we have a 3-tier level of classification of documents, and it ranges, Richard, you'll appreciate the analogy, but it's, low business impact, essentially unclassified, medium business impact, essentially secret, and high business impact, effectively top secret. And we really think of it in a kind of a risk sense. If a document has PII data, if a document has business, personal identifiable information, if it has, specific business impact that, will result in, reputational damage or financial loss of a certain, various criteria, that's how that document gets classified. And, this is something that we've been evangelizing to our customers and partners as a best practice, because once you do that and you educate the employee population, then you can they develop the sensitivity around, what's important to the company and what may be less so. And also, you start building the policies, the technical policies around how you store those documents, about what must be encrypted at rest, what must be encrypted in transit and so forth, and what may not be so important.
Yeah, it's very interesting, particularly as we talked a lot, Mark, about cloud computing. And the differences of, the shift to cloud computing, and the fact that, it's in some sense, cloud computing is a little bit in a rear view mirror. This is something that's implemented today, and it's in operation. But the companies that do cloud computing, and Amazon as well as Microsoft and others, the FISMA compliance and the government compliance actually force these changes to go on within the company in these parts of the organization. And that same compliance needs to be actually throughout the organizations to protect the organization, not just that step. One of the things that we discussed, for example, was taking the MSDS. This is something that's used in the chemical realm, correct, Jerry?
Yeah.
Regarding material safety and data sheets. This material safety actually has a logo on it that identifies it to people in the industry or firemen or other type of individuals that need to handle these materials, and just by a glance they can understand the nature and severity of the material that they're handling. So you can look at that, and based on a 1 to 4 scale, I don't know what that is, a 1 to 4 scale, Terry? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. The charts are sort of like that.
Yeah.
But color-coded and everything else. But it's very important for folks working in a research lab to be able to have that, because they can't see it, they're in trouble, because if you spill something on your hand you don't know about, you can lose a finger, or it may be benign, but you have to know what it is.
And so in cases where people are handling papers and documents, to actually have some type of data classification that was very visible, that indicated whether it's perhaps in this case a national security issue, an industrial security, corporate security, or even a trade secret. So that by a glance at a stamp, you can actually see how serious and how you must handle and or destroy this information.
Ty, can I just make a comment here? I think there is an enormous opportunity to actually do something on this front. And we have taught approximately 200 million people how to do data classification, and they've probably in this room done it within the last 90 seconds. It's called a hashtag. So our children don't know it as data classification, but they use it. And what we need to do is we need to take a lesson from the training of the entire population. Anybody got budget for 200 million person training classes? Anybody want to go to that training class? Right? Everybody been to training class, right? 45 minutes, sit there, data classification. Are you out of your mind? Right? How many of us learned to use hashtags? Everybody. So let's just stop. There is no such thing as data classification anymore. Let's stop using the term. Let's stop using the words. Let's just call it hashtags. Let's get on with it. Right? So all of a sudden, all the teenagers will know exactly what you're talking about. Well, dude, if you want to find a top secret document, you put hashtag top secret on it.
So,
right?
Stephen?
Just a comment.
So, thank you. It's a very good point, and I like it.
Sorry.
But I think dynamically, structurally, how we should do this is these guys have a lot of material, and I know how hard it is to get through it.
I didn't say anything for 34 minutes.
Just so I'm being clear, I didn't hear it itself.
So will you be following hashtag top secret from now on, though?
Once they're done telling us their solution, I think we should let them be as coherent as possible and do it. And then I think it's going to be our turn to challenge anything that they've said and ask them questions, which ad hominem, or however you want to do it. And then we'll make decisions as
He's
judges.
the youngest person on stage. Give him a break. Come on.
then,
Probably not.
and then we'll make decisions at the end, each of us. Did they do it right or not?
No, now, on the academic, we talked about industry, but there's also a huge amount of IP that's actually being fostered within the academic institutions. And we have representatives in the academic institutions. I know there's a number of you can actually speak to this, and why don't we just take and talk about that?
Yes, this is really important, especially when you talk about crown jewels, because very often there'll be Nobel Prizes awarded to something for the science, which leads to a big business. Compound semiconductors started that way. It's a $33 billion a year business, probably being ripped off by a lot of people, but it got started in an academic environment. And so I asked the people in the audience, which I can't see, how many of you guys went to university or college? Come on, raise your hands. I can see a few of them. How many professors actually filed a patent? One. All right. Well, we got the ratio pretty good here. Okay, so the problem is, and I'm in this environment every day. Remember, I spent 31 years at IBM starting in 1834, somewhere around here, and I migrated to university, and I was appalled by the fact that professors are really turned off about protecting IP. For one reason is that usually the IP guys at universities or tech transfer guys are not the swiftest people on the planet. But that's another story. But the problem is that there is no incentive for professors to do anything else. Now, you put something in that requires to get funding that you actually have outreach or something like that. Professors just have to have money. They got to feed their students. They want to keep their research going. So one of the ideas in this particular chart is to try to get the agencies, and I'm sure DARPA and everybody else will go along with this, to put in their requests for proposals that you need to respond to IP issues with your students in your laboratory. You don't even have to talk to the president of the university. You can actually accomplish this at the grassroots place where it counts, and pretty soon students will start following suit, because we don't want just to protect IP here. The people who go back to Korea want to protect their IP just as well. So it's a neutral political solution to that. Now, will it solve the entire problem? No, but the whole point of this discussion will be we need to change the culture, because as you will mention later on, sequestration is not the answer. You can't just hide your stuff, because we invented a patent system to prevent that, to go from the dark ages to modern. So the problem is, how do we accomplish keeping the patent system right, or fix it, if you will, and still protect what we have? And this is a good place to start. Start with your students and professors, because that IP can turn into crown jewels.
Mm-hmm. Larry or Pete, did you want to comment further?
I just think that if the federal, how do you do this? Well, the federal agency, whenever you put a proposal in, there's a whole crazy bunch of questions you have to answer just to submit the proposal. And I don't think it would be that onerous to say, what is your plan for protecting any intellectual property that comes from the public funding of this research? You have to, for instance, now for NSF, you have to have a data management plan. So any data that's generated by this research, you have to explicitly lay out in the proposal what your plan is to make sure that that data is accessible and so forth. That didn't exist 2 years ago. I mean, it's now got to be on every single grant that goes in. And that will drive, I think, most universities to say, well, the professor says, okay, I need this. The tech transfer office will start providing courses, providing training for the professors and students so that you know how to answer that question.
I'd just add, too, that, that bullet you have about universities need to understand their own profitability, super important. I think IBM has a huge revenue stream from its patent portfolio, and, I think if you put that before, any institution that does research, that there are potential dollars involved. We talked a little bit in the room about making it easier to do the right thing than the wrong thing, and this is one of those cases where you can provide clear, tangible incentives for doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I like the idea, Jerry, where you said when the students come out and they go back to their native country, that this is instilled in them, right? I like that part of it, because you go and you learn it, and it actually becomes a right-wrong issue, that then they are challenged with because they understand the value, and now it's a personal challenge to them if they're going to violate that or not.
One footnote, and I will let you return. So most of you have heard of something called the Bayh-Dole Act. Turns out the Bayh-Dole Act is insidious in a way because it allowed universities to start owning IP, but there's a back door. So if Intel wants to do a project and fund it on a federal facility, the little caveat in the small line says they can take a royalty-free license of this stuff and give it to IBM. And so nobody in their right mind, the big company, is going to do this. So what do? They give you contracts for metrology. It's good stuff, but it's not in the most holy place of the company. And so there's a barrier for professors and students to participate in the stuff that really counts for a corporation.
So these are things that need to change.
That's right. That's not going to happen by me, but maybe somehow we can start working on the Bayh-Dole Act at some point in time, because it still has that caveat that prevents the big guys from participating with professors that know what to do to help the company, but they're not going to take a chance with the IP leak to do that kind of research.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Jerry, the most capable, those most likely of being able to assist in developing new IP are the ones that are the exact same ones that are being blocked.
Right.
Sounds like that.
Most people don't understand that about the Bayh-Dole Act. They say, "Oh boy, we take all this IP out of the drawers and that are collecting dust in the government files, and let the universities do something." Everybody went cheering, "Yay, team, we did a great job." But it turns out it has that caveat that spoiled it.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Organizational policies. This is a fundamental change, and it may be something we have to do at the PC platform and on other devices, is the fact and the whole concept, we have the computing power to be able to do this, and now we're moving a little bit to how technology and policy can work together, but implement the dual networks within an organization. That you have within the concept a red and a green network, and that should you want to go run and go out on the internet, you use the green network, and the applications that are running in the green virtual machine on these machines that only have access to the green networking port and are separate processes entirely, access to memory, everything else is isolated in virtual machines, such that they only can go out on the internet and they have access to that information. But that is an unsafe area, right? But the red network is where all the business is conducted. And that's even where your email is interacting. But the machines run dual virtual machines that are basically separated. It means that some machines may have, come out with 2 network adapters on them. But this is just part of the changed environment that we're operating in. And that all the business is conducted on the red network. Email restricted. If you get an email with an attachment, you can't really click on it. You actually save it away. You can't click on hyperlinks to go outside of your network. It's just separated. So when you're on the red network, you're doing your business activities and secure data. The green network, if you want to participate on the internet, it's all on one display. That's where it comes together, so you actually see it on one display. But the windows that you see will have a red banner or a green banner, so you know what is safe and what is not safe. And you can't copy and paste between those windows. You can copy and paste between red, and you can copy and paste between green, but you can't go between the two. Just a fundamental shift in how this is done.
You can take a picture and then I don't see
There's
that.
all kinds of
You can
ways
always
around it.
take a cell phone and take a picture of it. But it's the fact of the matter that you make it difficult while raising the bars and setting the expectation that this is a secure environment and you need to act that way. If you have miscreants, there are going to be many ways. But this is just changing the fundamental rules of how we do this to make it harder, and so accidental leaks don't occur, for example. And people who are trying to attack your network, there's a barrier. Even if they attack your machine, they come in on green, right? They're not just directly connected to your back end. So we have that capability. So we have green and red VMs. Document classifications map to potential dollar loss and require training. So people understand why we're doing this and what the value is to the company.
I will say I have some misgivings on this one, just because it's not clear for 2 reasons. One is it's not clear that anybody would buy such a machine, and the second one is that even if you had one that was allegedly secure, the concept would fail once that allegedly secure one was actually hacked in some way. And so, I think it's a really interesting concept, and it's one that deserves further research, but we should go into it with our eyes open, realizing that, there is a trade-off here between, usability and what users are expecting to be able to do and what we're trying to accomplish.
Yep.
We've already learned a lot about this with government classifications and networks, SIPR and NIPRNet. And there's been multiple cases where dual use or dual network access computers have been compromised, and that bridge causes a problem. So I have some reservations about this as well, but the fact is that there should be, we're really looking for network separation to keep, keep the information off the front lines is really the goal here. Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
If you work in Los Alamos, they're a little bit more inside the classified arena. You're not on a network.
That's right.
has
You're air
access
gapped
to
from
the
the
outside.
Yeah.
So we've got 50 years or 40 years or something of experience in how you do this.
Pete, do you want to comment on to introduce the organizational slide?
Sure. So being a CISO for a cloud company and also dealing with a lot of, running some managed security service providers, I see hundreds of companies' failures to protect intellectual property and then help them. And so the group really tried to come up with a lot of ideas to focus on the organization, that are beyond technical issues or training issues. Things like, we know that Gartner has mentioned risk to supply chain as a big, huge issue, and making sure that the entire ecosystem from laptop, as Wave has pointed out, all the way into the server needs to be able to be trusted. And with that trust, you can start building things like in 7904, where now that you trust that machine, you can programmatically enforce where that data is located and fence it. So it's not just for PII source and use anymore, but also making sure that your data cannot move from certain places to other places, and that it can move from one place to another and have that programmatically enforced. So things are really advancing quite quickly there. We all know the issue of bring your own devices and the fact that they're not secure, they're not IT controlled, there's no policy enforcement of those. So we really need to look at the risks and be able to enforce BYOD, corporate enforcement of those things with encryption and security and enforcing one-time passwords. We also see that there's challenges with encryption to hard drives. We all know that you can buy them, but here's a quick raise of hand. How many people have an encrypted laptop hard drive right now? It's not enough. And with PGP out there and BitLocker, some of these solutions are free. So it's not like it's a cost issue. It's just a matter of going through a little bit of pain to implement it, and then it works very, very well. One of the things that my company really focuses on is only the application, the authorized application has access to the data. Right now, in a lot of companies, if you wanted to look at an Oracle database or a SQL database, there's no prevention of unauthorized activity looking at that information in the raw. So we really focus on making sure that the singular application that should have access to the data can, but no administrators, no DBAs, no unauthorized people, and things like database access monitoring, DAM, my favorite security acronym, are implemented, and things like logging to protect this so that when we do see unauthorized things, we can see it. And then, I'm the guy that has encrypt on his license plate, so I've been thinking about encryption for a long time, and we're absolutely not using enough encryption out there. It's straightforward for people that know how to do it. I know it is difficult for the average person to implement it, but for a company to buy it lock, stock, and barrel, you can buy the devices that manage encryption and even more importantly, manage the keys. Because it's not just encryption, it's really the keys. It's one thing to lock your house, but what do you do with that key? And you have to manage that completely. So we just threw some numbers out there just to show you that it's really a reasonable expense. And then, having change control processes and the ability to manage change in an ISO type format is key as well.
So this kind of brings the question of whether it's a national, priority. Is this a priority? Jerry, did you want to comment? I thought you had some comments.
Well, let's see, I don't remember what they were, so I want to pass the buck on this, in a way, because the national priority is that if we are going to get back in the manufacturing arena that we gave up back in the 70s for a service economy, we're going to have to make sure that the companies that get formed and the stuff that we do is still bleeding edge, not only bleeding edge, but we actually get the money back for being important stuff. So as a country, if we don't protect the crown jewels, we will lose in the long haul, because I was talking to Mark the other day, we had a little discussion about how fast our competitors are moving forward. I think, like the CO2 problem, I think the competitors are going to move faster than you think, and so if they don't need us to buy their stuff, we're going to be in deep poo-poo about that at some point in time. So it is a national priority, and because I don't care how successful your company might be individual, and they're making great progress in the stock market. We're a country, guys, not just a single company that has to worry about this.
Yeah, and this is really making part of the national discussion, right? The whole question about this is getting it out in the public, being candid about it, getting the message out, and then training both at the executive level and consistently through the students, the employees, the members of these organizations, the importance of security, and that this is just a different way of living. And this is what we need to do because of the rapid and very easy flow of information that is important of our social dialogue and how we manage it. But we also have to take the responsible action to protect that information and to be aggressive and consistent about how we manage it and how we protect it. And that part of that is that it's a national priority that we put the resources in place to be able to monitor attacks against the country, against our industries, and that the industries collaborate and work together to protect themselves and be able to share information on how to defend themselves against these ongoing and ever-increasing complex attacks. I mean, we talk about the fact that you're being attacked 5,000 times a day or 5 million times a day. You know, the challenge is they only have to get through once. Right? I mean, so this is something that we have to be extremely aggressive for and be able to monitor on an ongoing basis and keep changing the rules. And that's really where the essence of the CTO challenge really came out, is that, you know, we have to change the rules, we have to make it part of the national dialogue, and we have to go after it now.
Ty, we also talked about, we tiptoe around this a lot. We're too PC, we're too political correct. You know, we let folks like Mandy put a report out that fingers the Chinese that are doing this, when we all know that our government knows exactly where these folks are. And they're the only thing that they do is agree, yeah, we know about that. That's not the approach that we need anymore. It needs to be, forget the political correctness. We need to have it as an open and frank dialogue. If you're going to steal my stuff, I'm going to find you, I'm going to point you out, and there's going to be repercussions.
Eric and Vaclav, any comments about, you know, we contribute to the dialogue, any specific points you want to emphasize?
Well, I think we're going down the track now, which is, and it would be rare for me to say that more government would be a good idea, but in this case, I truly believe that the government has to have a big stick. There needs to be criminal enforcement around this. We've made a decision as a society a long time ago that illicit drugs are a bad idea. It brings society down, it creates pressure on the criminal justice system. So we go after not only the consumers of that, but we go after the distributors and the manufacturers of that with a criminal penalty. And to your point earlier, Ty, you know, if you're an executive sitting in a subsidiary of a company in the U.S. importing known stolen IP, I'm thinking that a jail deterrence might be just a thing. And it would probably send a message to others that maybe I don't want to be affiliated with a company that does that.
Yeah. Comments overall?
Yeah, exactly. I think that the overall combination between policies and technology is to make it very expensive for the third party to obtain the IP. So with technology, you can make it difficult to find the crown jewels and get it. And with the policies, you allow them then take the IP and build something, you do nothing until they show up at your shore, and then you take it. So you allow them to spend the energy, the resources to obtain it, to build something with it, and then just destroy it.
And so the oddity is, I think, in my mind, or something of a conundrum, is if somebody decides to make 10,000 pairs of designer jeans of a known label and bring them here, that's a criminal activity. The jeans will be confiscated and destroyed, burned, whatever, ground up, and the individuals, if they can be found, will find themselves in jail. Yet, I'm wondering about the economic consequences of that versus core IP that drives billions and billions into technology which has government security, consequences, general economic consequences. There's something wrong with the scales that we haven't quite figured out, that genes maybe aren't even as valuable as certain types of
Intellectual property. Right.
And if you can bring the other parties, it cannot be just the US, but if you bring EU, if you bring Australia, Canada, suddenly they have nowhere to sell it.
Yeah.
So they will obtain it, and so what? Because if they cannot make money out of it, if they cannot make real benefit, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right? So you make it
You've
so
taken away the incentive.
Exactly, you make it so expensive that it doesn't make the economic sense, the incentive there. And of course, there are the government secrets and everything. That's a different story. But on the economic level of the IP, you make it unattractive for them to steal it, and it's easier to just come and start negotiating and licensing for it.
So, Mark, with that, we hand it off to you. And these are other slides, but we hand it off to you to decide our fate.
Okay, and thank you. I'll just start by saying thank you. Really cool, lots of new ideas. Not shy, not halfway. These are pretty bold, and they have to be bold. So I think before I say anything, maybe do either of the judges have questions or comments you want to make?
Oh, yeah. I think you're chasing ghost bunnies. Look, I agree it's a very large problem, and it requires, and I hate to use this word, a private sector government partnership. But I think we are chasing ghost bunnies if we expect the government, respectfully, to do anything. The administration on both sides of the aisle are more concerned about getting reelected than addressing hard problems. It's bread and circuses rather than solving hard problems. And we know the history of that outcome. Just think of Rome. There is a lot that the government can do, but it needs to be empowered to do it. And so then we tend to look at Congress. Congress does two things, in my view, extremely well. Nothing and overreacting. This is a great opportunity for them to overreact and be captive of special interests. And we need to guard against that. That's why I think industry should lead the effort. Industry doesn't have a political outcome in the game. They have an economic outcome in the game. That's going to be the driver. So if the business interests get together and say, okay, internet service providers, we need your help. And it's too bad Janet Reno wasn't here, because I really wanted to ask her a tough question. I'm sorry.
The other Janet.
Yeah. I like the Janet Reno better, but that's another story. She recently announced that the Department of Homeland Security was going to provide signatures of bad actors that had been collected and analyzed by the government. I sat on the edge of my seat and said, yes, finally DHS is doing something productive. But then she took the air right out of my balloon by saying, you can buy this service from the internet service providers. So the government gives and the government sells. It seems strange. But I think part of the key to this, and I'm surprised you didn't address it, and I'm interested in your comments on this, is the internet service providers. They have the signatures, they can get the signatures, they know what the bad actors look like coming into selected points, points of access. Why not empower them economically, pay them, buy them, to keep the bad guys from coming in? I've had this discussion with my internet service provider, Comcast, for years. And their answer is, well, we want to protect your computer, so we will give you a system that you can install, that you can use to keep the bad stuff out. And it's free. Well, no, it isn't free. It's part of my subscription service. I'm not that stupid. But my response to Comcast is, why don't you guys do it? Don't rely on my 83-year-old mother to do something about it. Don't rely on teenagers who are smarter than I am to do something about it. You do it. You can be the source of that problem. You know, we keep thinking of military strategy, the Fulda Gap. We were very concerned about Soviet forces coming in. But we knew or had reason to believe that they were going to come through the Fulda Gap, a choke point. FiRe's Gap was in the North Sea for submarines. We knew when and where they were coming, and we could track them. We can do the same thing with the internet. Bottom line, I think you guys have just done an absolutely phenomenal job. This should be published.
We can't judge them yet. You gotta hold that up. This is a suspenseful moment.
I stand corrected.
But you did ask a question, so let's see about the question.
We did talk about blacklisting IPs, and there's a lot of commercial companies that sell stuff like that. And you're absolutely right. I don't think it made it to our initial slides, but it's deeper in some of our support slides. So absolutely, and the problem with it is there's no central repository, there's no central updating. A lot of these companies have their own specific ones. The effort to make this more of a universal solution is absolutely needed here.
There is precedent, obviously, for such an idea, the denied parties list that the Commerce Department maintains. The challenge is, and we could probably have a longer conversation about this, the challenge on the internet is there's so much more possibility for anonymity. You know, so I can hide myself as being from some other place or being some other person or something like that. And so, you know, it's a partial solution. It's a partial solution.
Yeah.
So could I say, you know, I live in a community at UC San Diego with 30,000 users on the shared internet. And until a few years ago, we saw just this incredible rise of spam and phishing and everything else that was going on. The campus eventually decided through discussion that it was empowered to take a collective action. Mm-hmm. And so through Barracuda, other kinds of things, I would say 98% of what comes into the campus gateway is blocked and destroyed. That, you know, maybe 99%. Yeah. And each of the 30, so that's because it sees the patterns. If you're sending something to 10,000 people, it's blocked. It's in your spam folder. You can unblock it if you actually think it's correct. But the first action is it's blocked. And then each of the 30,000, if they get something that gets through that and they know it's not anything they wanted, then you just mark it as spam. Those 30,000 are all active participants and refining the filter.
Right.
To collect it.
And as a result, basically, I get almost nothing that isn't really meant.
Okay.
Yeah, your comment.
I want to keep this moving because
it inspires another short question.
All right.
Wouldn't it be ironic if we set up, you know, China has the Great Wall of China, they have the Great Firewall of China. Wouldn't it be neat if we had the Great Firewall of America to keep the adversary out? And I'll be quiet now.
That's right.
But that's where I'm thinking that this banding together, which was one of our things, sort of came from that reasoning, that the companies that have ground jewels to protect can privately get together, and they have an enormous collective view out into the internet and what's coming. And by sharing that information, you can call it ISPs, but there's basically a sharing of information, and that's what I think has been missing. And you are seeing the companies doing that.
Yeah. The companies are doing that today.
Starting to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're blacklisting IP addresses. They're blacklisting where things are coming from. And you know, using Akamai and others to basically handle these.
Maybe we're just catching mid-stride. That's not quite.
Yeah.
Stephen?
So I think I want to be a little bit of a maverick on this front. Nobody should be surprised by that. Prosecute this list backwards. Okay, so I'm guaranteed there's somebody on the planet who thinks Microsoft's stolen a piece of intellectual property from them. Let's run this list against that concept. And it's never happened, right? I mean, there's never been prosecution or legal battles, or nobody's actually made that claim it's been perfect. No, that's not true. People have IP disputes every single day. And so my fundamental problem is prosecute this list upside down. And then we've got to discard the things for which we have no agreement because they're unsolvable problems at this moment in time. So the IP thing is just a fantastic idea, except if I point that weapons systems at Microsoft. I'll just pick them as an example of a really large software company, which for sure lots of people say, oh my God, I had that idea 10 years ago, and now look, they've built it into their product, right? And so we could go through this in almost every step of these. If you take the reverse position, you would hire lobbyists to prevent this action from taking place. And so I think one of the challenges when you make this list, I think the list is excellent. The problem is it's not what we should do. What we need to do is a very, very, very simple thing. We need to lead. We need to lead from the top. Venture capital needs to stop being excited about your plan to go to China. We need to make sure that the top companies in the world don't have voyeurism as their primary economic model on the internet. Privacy. We're pregnant is Crown Jewels IP. The concept that should be understood and known by many corporations and handled in a completely unreasonable manner and then propagated to a whole bunch of others to send advertising to that household is exactly the thing we're trying to fight against if it's an equally important fact but owned by the person that's a corporation. So my challenge right now would be that we have to start from a simple thing. We were talking about this before. Let me use an example. Microsoft publishes a letter that says voyeurism is no longer allowed. We'll spend $1 billion, just like their Trustworthy Computing Initiative. What'd they do? Examine all the code, look for viruses, check, install the concept of security in every business process inside Microsoft. How much did it cost? Initiation of it cost a memo. I'll buy the paper. Action, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it. Excellent. All right, so let's start. Will you or will you not look at all the information that's in Yammer? Will you or will you not look at all the files that's in SkyDrive? It could be a great marketing campaign. Volvo solved this problem. If you get into Volvo, safety is cool. Remember that? We just haven't made it cool. What's cool? Having an Asia strategy is cool. You don't have an Asia strategy, can you raise any capital? No. Ding. What if you say, look at every .com business plan that's on the table right now today. What's the fundamental business model? Voyeurism. We would like to compromise the intellectual property by convincing the consumer to click through on the agreement and give us the persistent right for all time to their copyright. It's insane. Yet, we don't yet have a concept of a business model that's the reverse of that. Yet, for business, that's fundamentally what we want. So we need to support those places where we can lead from the top at a government level, at an enterprise level, at a capital level, to support the value in protecting the intellectual property that's out there. From the smallest pieces that are really valuable, because Crown Jewels IP is such a great term. Your Crown Jewels IP and mine might be completely different. They're not just a file or just a fact. So the list is excellent. You have to test the list in the reverse and say if we were doing this and the person complaining was, the cotton manufacturing industry in England while we were busily stealing all their Crown Jewels IP, so what a plan. And so I would just say that it's an interesting starting point for the conversation. I think we need to have more knowledge, we need to have inventory, we need to have compliance. I think of it, and I think the best idea that's come to me in a long time in this concept, and it's articulated in here, and I think we need to feed that machine, is do you trust the financial reporting of the Fortune 1000 today?
No.
And the answer is mostly. right? It's easy actually, you know, but
That's a very generous answer.
it's easy to say no, but there's a very broad economy that's built off of it. And by the way, if you fundamentally break with the fiduciary trust, you lie and you get caught in the lie, you go to jail. And we don't have that construct here in any way, shape, or form. And I think we need to feed that machine. It's a mixture of regulation, of government, of boardroom leadership, of execution by the teams up and down the whole stack, of dual accounting systems so you're not trusting any one individual, of audit and review. All those concepts are in here. We have some excellent models. Health and safety is one, accounting is one. Guess what? Cybersecurity needs to become a regulated industry. That's what we're really saying. Of course. Because without regulation, we will never click our seatbelts.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. I just have a few comments that I noted while you were presenting, Ty, and a couple of questions. The comments, things that I saw that I liked that seemed to have high promise to me, the separate nets idea. So that, however that works, whether it's a small net or a big net, whether it's a consortium within there's private net, whether it's like Livermore, if you're big enough, you know, whether it's, but that's brilliant. And I think that's what the military does, and that's the only thing that I've ever seen work. So, you know, that sneaker net thing really is an impossible gap, except for USB.
Yeah. We epoxy those closed.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've disabled them. Yep.
So whether they're red, green, or whether they're physical, maybe all the above in some way or other, would be great, because those create real problems for invaders. I think that I love the idea of payloads. I've seen it before, but it's good and it's fun and it makes a lot of sense. And the phone home thing, ET phone home, is wonderful. I'm sure that the NSA would love to have that stuff in place. They probably do already. So that would be a great.
So we're stealing the crown jewels IP of the bad guys. I'm just, it's,
Well,
when you take
not
that to the
stealing their
reverse,
IP,
that's what
but
they're doing.
Setting the address of who did steal the IP.
The crown jewels IP of the bad guys are who they are.
Yeah, that's part of it. The separate keystone thing is pretty cool, you know, it seemed like. I like the idea of parsing out data into pieces that have to have all the pieces to work.
That's cool.
If you've got a jet engine blueprint and you're missing page 5, it doesn't help a lot. So that's kind of neat.
It's great to have the blueprint, but if you don't have the fan blades, it doesn't do much.
Right. And I also like the related part of so someone mentioned, I think Jerry mentioned, where if you had the fan blade diagram and you didn't have the know-how to melt down the metals and forge them in just the right temperature, it doesn't do you a darn bit of good to know what shape they are.
That's right.
The whole thing about tying this into TPP, I like that. I think we're underway doing that already. But TPP perceived as a platform for ongoing conversations for the next 50 years is great. And it won't just be TPP, it will be the Atlantic Treaty as well. And the arrest and visas thing, that's serious. And I think there's a lot of conversation right now in Congress. I think that the initial point you were making about this has to be part of the national conversation. It has to be something that each employee is aware of. It's not something that's a hassle or trivial. It's a propaganda campaign in the sense that we need to mount here so that people feel good about protecting IP. They're not perceived to be weirdos, they're perceived to be heroes. And that's a change we've got to get right.
Yeah, keep you much of that.
Loose lips sink ships, it's a whole...
Yeah, actually, I was saying that the other day, that's right. We could actually get those posters and put them in the...
we have them, we do it.
We do that. Yeah, we do that too.
Yeah, they're at Amazon too.
I think, as Stephen is saying, I think the SEC compliance is a very powerful tool, and you guys are kind of hanging some Christmas tree ornaments on that. And I'd love to see...
And as appropriately outside the organization, for publicly traded corporations, setting that as a standard, but then the equivalents within academia, within private firms as well.
Yeah.
So it's just, but let's set the precedent and let's get the dialogue.
Yes, yeah. I mentioned Livermore already, I like that. The Livermore experience with Wen Ho Lee taking, and this has happened more than once, it even happened with the head of the CIA at one point, but you know, the idea that you're just to take your homework with you home that night and put it on your home PC. I forgot. The whole nuclear, you know, W-88 or whatever it was, the warhead designs end up in China or some other place. I didn't do that. I just put it on my PC. Right? I'm not guilty. So we have to be aware that there is this kind of passive. This happened with Lawrence Franklin as well, you know, who took presidential directives from George Bush Jr. and put them on his home computer. I wouldn't send them to Israel. Somebody else must have done that.
Yeah, I think they're the geofencing and some of those things where it's not valid in this IP address, it's not valid on this non-machine, there's no TPM on this machine, it simply cannot be displayed, it simply will not render. And I like even better where the OS will actually self-destruct it, right?
It's just crazy. It's
So-
just poor professionalism.
Yeah.
It would never happen.
Well, it's professionalism and.
Well, the head of our CIA did.
Technical enforcement.
Actually, the head of our CIA almost went to prison because he did that exact thing.
Mark, an important other little tiny point. Whenever you think of concepts like self-destruct or wipe, always ask the reverse question, which is, how can I weaponize it? So you put up the cloud service wipe of all of Microsoft's end handset phones inside Microsoft, and somebody hacks into that, and the next morning there are no phones. Wipe is a very interesting.
What's the dark side of it?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, nuclear heaters in the basement to warm the house are great, except when you set one off in New York.
Okay. There's a tech thing that occurred to me that you guys are dancing around, but we haven't quite banged on it, and that is, could we create a world in which all data had GIS tags inherently in it? The data knows where it's supposed to be and not supposed to be.
Well, you're talking about the context.
If we had file structures and data structure, it's not actually a file, it's actually the data itself. But if we had a way of doing that, whether you want to call it watermark, what do you want to call it? So it's GIS marked. On Ty's laptop, it only lives in this one place. And he has to do a very intense thing to move that to another place, even if it's easy to do. Or it can only live there. Yeah. And if I try and move it to my machine, it's done, right? So
geofencing is the term we use.
Yeah, NIST is considering it with 7904, and some of the use cases actually address that specific
so when you're talking about encryption, that would be beyond encryption. It's just like the data will only exist in certain places.
It is. It complements encryption, but
that could solve a lot of crown jewel problems.
Device identity, machine identity, user identity, and policy.
Say it again?
Device identity, machine identity, user identity, and policy. That's what makes it all work.
Yes.
You just described a policy of geofencing. You can have a policy of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Vin Cerf
you were talking a lot about
to it as well.
Yes.
Vin Cerf actually said one of the things that he sees in the future as protecting the internet is geofencing, essentially. He didn't say the word, but he talked about tying data to machines.
Yeah. So that's a big idea.
Yep.
Ty, you mentioned several times messaging to the public and how that ought to happen. It's obviously going to be my problem tomorrow morning when I get up. And so where should these messages appear and how should they appear? It's a question.
You know, I think what we need to do is actually get a consistent message together. And so we have consistent talking points about how we carry the message and to which audience that we're messaging, so that it actually resonates with those audiences, and that, you know, we keep it simple, and we have a consistent resource to where people can go to actually dig deeper in it, and there's a community that we create for discussion on it.
I want to pick up on something that I think Stephen said was, and that is, you know, I do worry a little bit about the law of unintended consequences here, because if you're geotagging documents, okay, that's a very parochial U.S.-centric point of view, but there are a lot of companies like mine that have thousands of trusted employees in China that have signed employee agreements and so on. And so that becomes I'm not saying it's a bad idea, it's a good idea, but the issues are complex when we start thinking about a globalized world.
I wasn't being clear enough there because I didn't really mean that. That is one idea.
Yeah.
But I meant that on any given file structure, you get the data in or you create the data yourself. It's a letter that's a secret letter. You want to buy a company. You put it into Word/98/ and then there it sits. That's its home. Now, if anyone tries to move that document to some other place, it doesn't matter what country you're in, it blows up. Unless you have given permission for that to happen. So that if it's endemic to the file itself, not even the file structure, this has nothing to do with countries. It has everything to do with the data knowing where it lives.
And it's not
if it's supposed to be in China, it's in China.
It's not just geo. I mean, you're in this, you know, digital infrastructure with all kinds of layers and everything. It knows, it's context aware of where it is. And if it's been moved by anybody to some other place, space location is just one of those attributes.
You could impose a geo thing on top of that, but it's really a file.
Here's the problem. Data is not aware.
That's right.
Data is just state. What has to be aware is the policy processing engine.
Right.
If you don't trust the policy processing engine, so it's really at the end of the day,
has two jobs here.
Not device ID, as Microsoft's current architecture is, it's actually app identity. Isolated, protected, trustworthy execution, assured by the OS, prosecuting policy on static data to assure whatever policy rule set you wish to have, the right user, the right machine, the right time of day, the right weather outside, whatever it happens to be, asserted within an environment where the word trust defines, if I ask it to do it again, I'll get the same result. That's what it means.
Right.
That's what I meant to say.
There's, right along the lines, sorry, right along the lines that Stephen's stating, Barry, we're all looking at you now, I wonder if the operating system couldn't, you talked about a shell game, that's an interesting idea, could, instead of encrypting the data straight up the way we do today, could the operating system play a shell game by nature? Could it have a function within it that is constantly moving things around so that to the user, me, it looks fine, I don't even notice. But to somebody coming from the outside, wait a minute, where are my files? I found the guy's files yesterday and they're not there anymore.
It is doing that.
Latest versions of the operating system actually move things around in memory so that you can't attack specific areas.
That's right.
Of memory.
So it's
By memory location.
So it's an address space layout randomization, it's called technically. And
But if I just
exactly
know
what
by
you said.
file folder, I'm going that direction. Here I find it in the file folder, it's called Mark, and I'm going to come back to Mark every time.
Yep.
It doesn't care where the memory location is. So could the OS also do that and provide some break in the tree so that I see the tree as it always is, but that anybody who's an invader who doesn't have my permissions or whatever comes in and won't see that. They'll see a different tree every day.
A disposable track phone for your data is what you're describing. And it's absolutely achievable, again, once I have an abstraction, so the file doesn't say Mark, it just says blah, and it's encrypted, so you don't know what's in it. And so now I can put it anywhere in the world, I just have to have left a pointer to where it is, and I can move it all the time.
Well, it's actually possible technically to do it today. The distributed file system actually allows that capability, but the fact of obfuscating it, I don't think we've taken it to that level.
That's right.
The actual technical solution exists, but the obfuscation is the next step.
Okay.
In fact, and if the file system itself stores, chunks of the file all over the physical disk.
Right.
So your point is right, we haven't taken it to that next level.
And you addressed forced disclosure, but I felt like the question is, how do we prevent? You say you're not supposed to allow it anymore. Well, every CEO is forced to disclose crown jewels on a daily basis to China. So what are we going to do that will keep China from making that requirement, or what are we going to do that will make CEOs reluctant to strike that deal when they're being pressured to strike it? What's the penalty for a CEO who does that? Is there a penalty?
Well, I mean, the other question is whether that it's allowed, on that sense, whether it's allowed. Because in the case where they have to go to the State Department and actually get State Department, or to actually get the State Department to look the other way, in the case of
I'm going to give you two
FAB
examples. When China couldn't launch a rocket, literally, and they had this thing called the Long March 1, the Long March 2, and if you will remember, they'd light the fire, and it would go fall over sideways, go a mile that way, and blow up an entire village. True story.
Yeah.
And so
It's a
obviously
long
that's an
but
issue.
short march.
And a very long march. and the result was Boeing and General Dynamics, if I remember properly, were trying to get the satellite part of this thing working because they wanted to do business together. And China said, all you have to do is help us with the inertial navigation, and then it'll be fine.
Okay.
And against every law in the book, they did it. They illegally transferred IP of how to run a rocket, a commercial rocket, could never be used for nuclear weapons. And a moment later, they had a working ICBM. And Boeing and General Dynamics were taken to court by the U.S. government, and they each paid $1.50 or whatever it was.
Right. Golden parachute.
You know what I mean? I mean, they literally, it was probably $150,000. I have no idea what it was, but it was like so small that it was a cost of doing business for a week, and meanwhile, they kept their...
I mean, this is where execs go to jail.
This might be where execs go to jail.
I mean, when you take them away from their family and these type of things, and all of a sudden you're not in the Shangri-La Hotel, but, you get served 3 meals a day, and you don't get to go, ping pong is your exciting thing of the day. I think that's an appropriate response to that.
I wanted you to say it instead of me, but thank you for saying it. I'll tell you one more little anecdote, because this is a big, big problem, I think. This is where the CEOs don't get it yet, and where they actually lobby against what we're talking about. And you could fully expect the American Chamber of Commerce and so yes, to come out and say, I don't like this idea because you're telling my guys what to do. When that IBM chip deal happened, and IBM gave the plans for the most advanced chip, I had a chance to be working with some generals inside the Pentagon on a related thing. And there happened to be the people in that room that day who had said, okay. And I said, I was supposed to be helping them figure out how could technology be used against us in future wars. And I said, so let me just and I'm not going to use the swear words that I actually use with these generals here, grown-ups. But I said, look, how did this happen? And they said, oh, well, you don't understand. We were like you, we were against it. But the Department of Commerce told us we had to do this deal.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, who's defending what country? What's your job?
Department of Commerce told them.
And you're responsible for the security of the
They had to
United
do this
States.
deal.
And you're letting first-grade technology that can be immediately used in dual-use purposes, you are actually letting that out the door. Is that what you're telling me?
So I'm going to use a different word than the word I used, and I said to these generals,
That's treason. I mean, that's...
Yeah, but the analyst got his bonus on recommending foreign trade as a recommended strategy for Boeing for satellite launches in China. And so the capital markets are fundamentally supporting it. They're blind to this. If we could make a short-term profit in the capital market by trading out the entire intellectual property of Boeing, but the stock doubles this year, 5 years from now, kind of a problem. But we make our bonus on this year, so we're done. So we have a 90-day view into this right now, driven by capital.
I said to these guys, excuse me, I'm going to use a bad word. What the frank were you thinking?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so it's tough. That's a tough problem.
I mean,
voluntary disclosure is a tough problem.
But then, do you press charges?
I think you take him to jail. I think
it's Leavenworth is a nice place.
Yeah. And the last piece, which is related to this, is retribution by China or Russia or anybody else. So,
but until we take these stands, right, Mark? Yeah. Until we take a stand, it's not going to change.
That's right.
Until somebody big takes the fall, until somebody's actually in that under lock and key, and it's well known, it's not going to change. And so we have to have the audacity. We have to have, you look at your kids. Are they going to be safe? Are they going to have an opportunity for a future that's better than the one that we are experiencing? Where are our values? And what are we willing to compromise? It's time that we stop.
Our values are such that today, the leading Chinese PC manufacturer is building PCs in North Carolina in order to get approval to sell to the U.S. government, and they will have more U.S. content in a Lenovo PC this year than you have in either Dell or HP. And Dell and HP are so far silent on the response. So they're actually going to be successful in a marketing strategy of made in the USA as a Chinese manufactured PC to put the fundamental parts in place. Now, the supply chain is still a little more interesting than that, but they're taking senators and congressmen on tours of the manufacturing facility in North Carolina. And so, in reality, we're taking the context of a sort of protectionist model of manufacturing and applying it from the only person who's on the plan is China, right? They totally got it. Oh, we'll build the stuff in the U.S., then we can sell it to them.
Japan had the same response to tariffs on cars.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job of demoing this in the 70s and 80s in the auto manufacturing industry.
All right, so we're actually quite over time, but it's such an important subject that couldn't care less.
But Mark, it's time to stop.
It is time to stop.
It's time to stop. It's time to hold people accountable to the responsibilities for which they took an oath of office. They've signed an allegiance. They have committed to hold a line, and they're not. And at that point, we must hold them accountable, and we must be able to punish them when they actually go over that line. And until we do, we're screwed.
Right.
But can I just add that note that I think all very melodramatic and important too. But the 80 to some huge percentage, let's say 80%, 90% of this can be forestalled by appropriate procedures within the individual corporation, enterprise, or governmental organization. And so, just thinking about, the infiltrations of, viruses, phishing devices, and so on, we do have it within our technological capability to stop the overwhelming majority of that. And like a burglar.
But we don't have that top 1% ability. In other words, that 80% thing is an illusion if your job is to stop the theft of crown jewel IP.
The point
when military
being is just like in the case of a burglar, where, you know, if you have a dog, the burglar's likely to go somewhere else, or if you have an alarm system, even a sign that says I have an alarm system when I don't,
Right.
you know, the burglar's more like, we're talking about levels, you know, levels of vulnerability.
So I'm
here.
disagreeing.
Yeah.
Because I think there was 100% penetration. And people, some, RSA did have a dog.
Well,
So
we
I think what you gotta say is.
We built the fab in China, I mean.
And they put the keys on the internet
All right.
because it was convenient.
All right,
I
all right.
mean,
Okay,
hello?
okay, enough, guys.
You make the hose, the
Another
hose smaller.
idea.
Mark, we're not passionate about this.
That's good. The fact that
We
we're all
know,
getting
I
into
agree,
this.
we know how to solve the problem, you gotta get up in the morning and start.
So,
You gotta start.
one thing that occurred to me, and it's my last comment, while listening to you, Ty, and listening to all of you, is I think it would be an appropriate thing to take these materials that you've worked on, to deputize everybody in this panel right now, and to send you out, like the 12 disciples, not 12 yet, with these materials, and so you can put these into your own presentations, take these to your own companies, and evangelize exactly what you feel so passionate about here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
You're the team. Okay. So now we come down to the moment of truth. And I thought of this really clever way of doing this, either thumbs up or thumbs down.
Oh.
So we have 3 votes. We're bound to at least figure it out. And with no further ado, I would like...
Is it majority or unanimity?
No, it's a majority.
Okay.
So thumbs up or thumbs down, did this group succeed in creating a checklist which will create either zero loss or something darn close to zero loss of IP? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
That's a pretty high standard.
That is a pretty high standard.
Yeah,
Steve?
unfortunately, I have to agree, I think we have a list, but I don't think it solves the problem yet.
All right. I'm going to vote yes, but with the caveat that a lot of this stuff is a first strike and that it needs more work.
Right.
So this is the first time that it's been a thumbs down. I don't think that's bad necessarily, because this is a really big problem. And instead of taking it as a loss, I would say, I think we all agree that you're on the right track.
Yeah.
And that you've laid out a beautiful skeleton for what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the worry is even more is needed. So keep it up.
So Mark, what I would say is, you know, the CTOs, I think, had in their area of expertise of the technology, there's a lot there. What they're trying to do is surface areas of policy that require people who are in the government, not the private sector, and cultural change. And so those do need more work.
They do.
But what we tried to do was surface those as being as important or perhaps more important
Yes.
than more deeper technological analysis.
Yes.
We also did.
And I personally said it's not going to be a radar game, and the tech thing is going to keep changing. You can't win on that basis, and I still believe that. That no matter how secure tonight a new change technically is, the bad guys will figure that out in about 24 hours, and you have to start again. So that isn't the end game. If we need an end game here, that's just what we got to do to have good hygiene. All right. Well,
Mark, can we have one last comment?
Sure.
I actually think that the panel did a truly fantastic job of covering the full problem set. I don't think there was a substantial area that was left uncovered. And so, do we have an answer to the problem that would protect Crown Jewel's IP? I think everybody on the panel would agree the answer is not there yet. But have we correctly surfaced all of the issues from policy to technology to infrastructure, some of the ideas that are there? Excellent. I think the panel did a fantastic job of that. And so, from a vote perspective, I would say that we've properly characterized the whole problem. We haven't left huge areas of it untouched.
Richard, you want to say anything? Yeah.
I'm happy that you've made as much progress as you did. It reflects a lot of thought, which I think is very important. And I really am enamored with your idea of making these guys the apostles and the evangelists to go out and spread the message. Because it's only going to be addressed from the top down. We all know that cultural change takes place in an organization when the CEO says, "Thou shalt."
Right.
Right. Thank you very much.